Ladies and gentlemen, a very, very happy New Year to all of you, the third day of the Year of the Rat. Let me first of all apologize for having misspoken a couple of days ago at the government press conference on Chinese New Year Day. I apologize unreservedly to everyone, especially those who might have felt offended or affected in any way. I pledge to you that I will, of course, be extra vigilant and alert and careful in the coming days as we together try to give the latest scientific evidence to the public and to the world indeed throughout the rest of this outbreak. I'm going to be speaking in both languages, English and Cantonese, so please bear with us. It will take a little longer than otherwise. And we're going to start. First of all, let me just say that this literally came at 7 o'clock this morning. And Professor Wu and his team have not slept in about 4 days now. And I apologize for the very, very last minute A&E last night, which is when the initial set of findings came out to me, and I actually came back from a business conference in Bangkok. I landed literally 2 hours ago. I think it's important enough that right after we finalized this note, I sent it to the headquarters of the WHO. I understand the Director General is about to land or has just landed in Beijing, and his top team in infectious disease control is in Beijing or is about to be in Beijing. So I sent that team a preprint of the report I'm about to give you at 7 this morning. I've also sent it to the national authorities in Beijing as well as to our own government, so that we give the latest and the most updated scientific evidence. And therefore, I'm now giving it to you just a few hours after I gave it to the World Health Organization. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the latest official reported confirmed cases. The y-axis on the left that you can see is the total number of confirmed cases as reported by the health authorities on the mainland. And the right-hand axis is the number of cases exported outside of mainland China. And the yellow line refers to the right-hand y-axis, whereas the blue and the red line refers to the left-hand y-axis. As you can see, the curves have a very steep exponential shape, indicating that this epidemic is growing at quite a fast rate, and it's accelerating. So the real question is, given the lag between infection, incubation, symptom onset, and then admission into a hospital treatment, and then eventually either recovering or perishing from this infection, given that lag, we used our methods, which we described to you the last time, to try and infer how many cases there actually are or were as of 2 days ago in Wuhan and in other places, other large cities in particular in mainland China. 好了，以后是 reiterate in English. On the left-hand panel are the expected inferred number of confirmed cases. On the right-hand graph is the expected inferred number of infections. The difference being that those on the right include the pre-symptomatic cases, that is, those cases who have already been infected but are still in the incubating stage of the illness. All right? And the left-hand panel shows the number of clinical or clinically apparent confirmed cases should be somewhere around the region of 25 to 26,000 as of Chinese New Year Day. And on the right-hand panel, inclusive of those who might have been incubating and therefore had not shown any symptoms yet, the number approaches 44,000. Right? So going on next, this is the exact same slide I showed 1 week ago. And this slide shows the travel patterns of Wuhan, which happens to be the major transport and transit hub of central China, extensively connected to and linked with all of the other major city clusters in the country, to north, south, east, and west. And this shows a nowcast as of January 25th, Chinese New Year Day, the expected inferred number of exporter cases from Wuhan to all of the other major Chinese cities on the mainland, ranging from, as listed in the table on the right-hand side of the slide, 18 cases in Qingdao to a high of 318 in Chongqing. All right? Now, so that's nowcasting. That is just taking a snapshot as of 36 hours ago. If we were to run the model again at this moment, of course, the numbers would be higher. But that is really not the most important point. If we take those numbers then, and we do a forecast, the forecast is, number one, big question. We now have a major population or citywide or cluster of citywide or megalopolis-wide quarantine of population movement, as we've seen since January 23rd and 24th, starting from Wuhan and then extending to several of the neighboring cities in and around Wuhan. Now, what we did was to do two scenarios. The upper panel shows that if there had not been such a population quarantine, and the lower panel shows that there is such a population quarantine. As you can see, they are almost identical, which suggests that this population quarantine may not be able to substantially change the course of this epidemic in the other major city clusters. It is not to say that it's ineffective, but it may not be able to change in a substantial way. The epidemic curves would develop, or is expected to develop, in these other major Chinese city clusters, as listed. All right? As you can see, this is a rather complicated slide, so I'm just going to take a little bit longer to explain this. On the x-axis is calendar time. It's the American convention where the month comes first. All right? So you see from December all the way to August. And what it shows, these are epidemic curves, or epi-curves, of the major city clusters in the country. Chongqing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Beijing. And as you can tell, Chongqing is expected or projected to have the largest epidemic, mostly arising from the fact that it has a very large population, but also because it has the most intense traffic volume connected with Wuhan. So it's coupled with Wuhan most tightly of these 5 major city clusters. Secondly, you will see that the timing of the peak is somewhere in and around April, May. And what separates out Chongqing from the other 4 is that Chongqing is expected to peak 1 to 2 weeks before the other 4 major city clusters. Again, it is simply a volume and intensity of travel linked phenomenon. What we have not shown is the expected epicurve for Wuhan, which will precede that of Chongqing again by 1 to 2 weeks. So we are at the stage where we have not seen the peak of the Wuhan epidemic yet, and then we would expect 1 or 2 weeks later, followed by Chongqing, and then 1 or 2 weeks later, after that, followed by Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. Now, a special note on Hong Kong and Macau. Hong Kong and Macau, one mustn't just look at the direct links between Wuhan and Hong Kong and Macau because of the transit arrangements, particularly by rail, between different ports within the Greater Bay Area, but particularly Guangzhou and Shenzhen. And therefore, we were not able to capture or disaggregate that number just for the two special administrative regions. So this is the slide that is most complicated. That is why I wanted to spend a lot of time on it. Now, the only remaining element that I have not addressed is up at the top, the two lines of text. So what this graph implies is that in addition to Wuhan, we are expecting to see epicenters of self-sustained or self-sustaining epidemics in these other major city clusters on the mainland. That is, they will not just be exported cases from Wuhan. That the exported seeds will most likely actually start a local epidemic. All right? That is what these epicurves actually mean. The question is, can this be contained within the mainland of China? And given that the four Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen city clusters, they account for 53% of all international travel in the country and 70% of all international air travel outside of Asia originating from mainland China, it is highly likely that if and when they develop their own self-sustaining epidemic, they in turn will go on and seed other major ports as a destination if they were the origin. Okay? Conclusion that we draw from this set of analysis, and that is why it is important that we break this news to you literally on the same day, several hours after we have submitted to the WHO and to our government. The 2019 novel coronavirus epidemic that started in Wuhan, maybe it is not a prediction, but it is in preparation as a precautionary principle. As a precautionary principle, we have to be prepared that this particular epidemic may be about to become a global epidemic. This is not a certainty by any stretch of the imagination, but there is a not weak, or there is not insubstantial probability that this might happen. And therefore, we must prepare better for it. Secondly, it is quite clear that there is already self-sustaining human-to-human spread in quite a number of major Chinese cities. Whether these self-sustaining chains of transmission will be sufficient to spark their own local epidemics, i.e. generate their own local cases over and above what they may be receiving from Wuhan as exported cases. And if that happens, then because we have got at least 4 major city clusters around the country, north, south, east, and west, that have extensive links with the rest of the world's ports, then the chances of seeding sufficient numbers in overseas ports and cities such that they would generate their own local epidemics is not trivial. Again, let me emphasize, it is not a prediction. It is not certain, but these findings makes us concerned enough to alert the authorities and to alert the public so that there is not a sense of uncertain panic, but that we are all kept informed by the evidence, by the science as it develops. But as a precautionary public health principle, it remains incumbent upon us to prepare for that possibility, because that possibility is not trivial. Third, if we want and if we wish and desire to change the course of those epidemic curves that I presented, then we are looking at substantial, draconian measures limiting population mobility that should be taken sooner rather than later. It includes cancellation of mass gatherings, school closures, instituting work from home arrangements within population, but also between population clusters. How do we reduce population mobility? And substantial draconian measures may need to be taken. Should containment fail, that is, if the containment strategy turns out not to work and local transmission is established, mitigation measures during previous major outbreaks like SARS, MERS, or pandemic influenza could come off the shelf again and serve as a useful reference template for public health authorities. And those regions or cities or ports with the closest travel links with the major Chinese ports, as I've outlined, they probably would be well advised to look at their preparedness plans and should ready them logistically for deployment at short notice. 用中文講一講。